Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're in Volume 3, chapters 71 through 80, and we study 10 chapters each week and then come together as a class in order to study the words of the Buddha. That's why we call it a study group. Rather than me teaching and doing a discourse, a student will read the chapter. I will share about 5 or 10 minutes worth of teachings on that particular chapter, and then open up to any questions that you might have. If you've never joined us before, that's completely fine because we'll actually be reading the chapters in the class. But if you would like to join for future classes, you might decide to read the chapters prior to class, because there's the words of the Buddha, then there's a reference back to the original source, which is the Pali Canon, and then there's the reflections that I share to help you further understand the teachings of the Buddha through reflecting and helping you to see how to actually implement and practice the teachings that he's sharing. By you reading ahead of time, this will help you to further understand the teachings and retain them, and then you can come to class and ask any questions that you like. You can get these books by downloading them from buddhadailywisdom.com. From there, you can see the link for free downloads and free books, and you can download each of the books. Again, we're in Volume 3 now, and then in another few weeks, we will be moving into Volume 4. And this whole program, it's about a 1.5-year program. We start with a meditation to just kind of ease the mind into learning and having it prepared in order to better retain the teachings of the class that you're learning. So if you'd like to join for meditation, I'll go ahead and invite all of you to join for meditation, and then afterwards we'll start the class to actually learn the words of the Buddha. So we use chanting just to kind of ease into meditation. There's nothing mystical or magical with the chants. It just helps to ease the mind into the meditation. And if you know these, you're welcome to join along. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang namami Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Iti piso mahakava arahang samma sambuddho Vicacaranang samuno Sakato rogavito Anutero purisa Dhammasati satatawa manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, you should just be breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just establishing the breath, not forcing or controlling the breath. Just breathing in, establishing a nice, steady, consistent breath. When you're ready, breathe out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is established, start fixating the mind on the sound of the breath or the sensation of air moving into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, analyze it, or try to figure out where it's coming from. Just wherever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธภะคะวาพุทธังภะคะวันตังอะภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสภะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภควาติ All right, if you guys would like to gradually make your way out of meditation, I'll just once again welcome all of you guys, including those that have joined us since we started meditating. We just do this brief meditation just to kind of prepare the mind in order to help us to prepare for meditation and prepare for the class and retain the teachings of the class. I'm noticing that I can't share my Zoom screen. So those of you guys in Zoom, I'm going to log out and log back in so that I can share my screen here. For some reason, it's not letting me share my screen. I'll be right back with you guys. For those of you guys that are on live stream, it'll just be another few moments here and I'll be back up and running. It's not letting me share my screen again. Let's see here. I apologize for the delay, everyone. Just give me a few moments here and I should be able to get this working. I changed a few settings on Zoom this week, attempting to limit the Zoom crashers who come in and try to crash our class, but it looks like I might have done something that doesn't allow me to share my screen. Okay, there we go. All right. So we should be up and running with screen sharing, both in live stream as well as in Zoom. And now I would like to invite any of the students from Zoom, if you guys would like to read any of the chapters. We're starting off with chapter 71, and typically what we do is have a student read the chapter, then I will share some teachings on it and open up to any questions that you guys have. As you have questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, and I'll be able to see that and answer your questions. And then if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. Is there anyone in Zoom who would like to do some reading here? Okay, it looks like we don't have any volunteers in Zoom. I'll go ahead and read the first chapter, and then those of you guys that are in Zoom at any point, if you guys would like to volunteer to read, you can just raise your hand and let me know. So this first chapter is chapter 71. It's titled...
Teacher David?
Yes.
Your mic is off. You're muted.
Okay, that's probably why we don't have any volunteers. Okay, there you go. That's probably why we don't have any volunteers. I was asking for any volunteers in Zoom that would like to read, and my mic was off. So if there's anyone in Zoom who would like to read, we have this first chapter. You're welcome to volunteer to read. I was getting ready to read it, but it looks like Donnie, you would like to go ahead and read?
And I can read that, sir.
Sure.
Chapter 71, Craving and Anger Does Not Exist. Monks, there are these four things that are born. What for? Craving is born from craving. Anger is born from craving. Craving is born from anger. And anger is born from anger. When distance from sense desires, distance from unwholesome mental states, enter and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy, on that occasion, craving born from craving does not exist in him. Anger born from craving does not exist in him. Craving born from anger does not exist in him, and anger born from anger does not exist in him. When, with the subsiding of thinking and pondering, by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he enters and resides in the second jhana, which is without thinking and pondering, based in concentration, filled with excitement and joy. The third jhana, the fourth jhana, on that occasion, craving born from craving does not exist in him. Anger born from craving does not exist in him. Craving from anger does not exist in him. And anger born from anger does not exist in him.
Okay, thank you, Donnie. So here the Buddha is going deeper into his teachings about what causes some of the discontentedness and what causes certain aspects of the mind to arise. When you first start out your learning on the path to enlightenment, you learn about the Four Noble Truths, and you learn about how craving, desire, attachment leads to all discontentedness. It leads to anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, even the slightest displeasure is all coming from craving, desire, attachment in the mind. Well, here the Buddha is going deeper into this and helping you to see other aspects of the mind, because in order to train the mind to get to this enlightened mental state, you need to understand how the mind works and how the mind functions. So he starts you off with this window into what's happening in the mind with the Four Noble Truths, but then in other parts of his teachings, he's exposing you to more and more understanding of what's truly happening in the unenlightened mind. Because as you understand what's happening in the unenlightened mind, and you have the wisdom of what's happening, and you have the understanding of what should happen for an enlightened mind, When you observe the certain unwholesomeness that's going on in the unenlightened mind, you can restrain the mind, you can train the mind, you can redirect the mind to essentially uproot and get rid of these various aspects of the mind that you're not interested in having anymore, which is based on the pollutions of the mind from the unenlightened mind. So the unenlightened mind, the Buddha is describing that there's these four things, that craving is born from craving, anger is born from craving, craving is born from anger, and anger is born from anger. This is helping you to further understand what's happening in the enlightened mind or the unenlightened mind. Then eventually he talks here about the jhanas, and essentially saying that someone who's in the jhanas is not going to be experiencing these things that we're about to talk about right now. And then that when you move into that first, second, third, and fourth jhana, you won't be experiencing what we're about to talk about. Those jhanas are preliminary phases that the mind goes through before it reaches the first stage of enlightenment. Once the mind is in that first stage of enlightenment, it won't regress. It'll just continue to move forward, ultimately getting to enlightenment. But while the mind's in these jhanas, the mind can actually regress backwards. So you're not interested in indulging and becoming so prideful and arrogant that your mind is in the jhanas. Instead, just continue to focus on developing your practice and moving closer and closer to that first stage of enlightenment so that you can get out of the jhanas and into the first stage of enlightenment. But let's explore what the Buddha is talking about here, which is above and beyond what he describes in the Four Noble Truths. And I'm going to use the guidance that I'm providing here in the chapter to help you see what it is that I was sharing, and using this common example to help you illustrate and understand what he's talking about. So if you're studying with me for any length of time, you already know that craving, desire, attachment, that mental longing and strong eagerness is what leads to discontentedness in the mind. But now the Buddha is going to describe for you in this particular chapter that craving is born from craving. And what he's describing here is how you can have one craving that leads to another craving. And I use an example here of somebody who is maybe craving, desiring, attached, and wanting wealth. So somebody might have this certain craving for wealth, and they want to be rich and very wealthy. And now with that particular craving, there's going to be more cravings that are born from that craving, that the mind is now going to be craving and obsessed perhaps with increased promotions in their career, increased money, a lavish lifestyle, luxury cars, clothing, jewelry, and property. Now, there's no harm if somebody is interested in improving their income and moving forward in life and having certain aspects of material possessions and enjoying that for themselves as they work really hard. But the problem is that when there's craving for these things, that's where the mind's going to experience discontentedness, and it's going to make unwise decisions as it's progressing in one's career or as it's working towards these things. So if there's craving, desire, attachment for wealth, it can be born into additional cravings. There can be more cravings that are born out of that craving for wealth, like increased promotions, increased money, lavish lifestyle, luxury cars, clothing, jewelry, and property. But if you never did anything, if you were very complacent and lackluster and you really didn't pay attention to growing your career, you wouldn't be able to create a peaceful and joyful life there either. So you need to practice this middle way where you practice having goals, objective, and interests, and you work towards improving your skills and your qualifications and your promotions in your career, and you can gradually work towards that, which typically that will come with increased money. But when you're craving and desiring it and you're craving this wealth, then there can be additional cravings that come on top of that. And that's what the Buddha is describing here. And as long as there's craving in the mind, you're going to tend to make unwise decisions. So you might be craving and yearning and longing and going down this path of building up your career, but then it can all fall apart because you've been making unwise decisions in the process. So what you would like to do is have goals, objective, and interests and work towards improvement in your career rather than allowing craving to exist for lots of wealth, because then it's going to create more craving on top of that. Then the Buddha talks about anger is born from craving. This is something that you probably have already learned if you've been studying with me for any length of time. That let's just use this same example, that if there's craving for wealth, then when these things can't get acquired. So when one doesn't acquire wealth and one doesn't get an increased money, lavish lifestyle, or luxury cars and property, then when those things aren't acquired, the mind can become angered and frustrated, annoyed, and all those lesser versions, right? So we talk about it as anger, but in reality, there's this anger, hatred, ill will, frustration, irritation, annoyance, and lesser versions like that are going to be arising in the mind, because if there's craving for wealth and promotions at work, increased money, lavish lifestyle, luxury cars, clothing, jewelry, property, if you get those things, your mind's going to get pleasant feelings. But when you don't get those things because of any number of obstacles, then your mind's going to experience this anger. So that's what the Buddha is describing here, is that anger is born from craving, that anger arises due to craving. And now let's look at the next one, which is craving is born from anger. So this is the same thing. What I'm describing here is that when there's craving for wealth, that then the mind can experience this anger, and then there's this craving that arises out of the anger. So let me explain how this works. So that if there's craving for wealth, and then you have this desire, this longing and yearning for your career, increased money, lavish lifestyle, luxury cars, clothing, and jewelry. If you don't get what you want, your mind now becomes angered. You're experiencing painful feelings. And for the untrained mind, the only thing that the mind knows is that these painful feelings are uncomfortable, and it doesn't like these painful feelings, and it wants to get away from these painful feelings. And the only way that the untrained mind knows how to do that is through craving something and chasing after something to be able to get those pleasant feelings again. So when somebody has craving for wealth, they don't get what they want, they're having struggles and difficulties at work, things aren't working out the way that they would like, there can be more craving that springs up in the mind that now leads to cravings for such things like sex, drugs, alcohol, shopping, material possessions, or other cravings like gambling and things like this. So this is how, once the mind is angered due to craving, the mind is now angered. Now when it's angry, feeling those painful feelings are uncomfortable to the mind. So now there's more craving that comes out of the anger as you now start craving things like sex, drugs, alcohol, shopping, material possessions, gambling, and things like this. So this is how craving is born from anger. And if you understand this, now you can train your mind to not do that, because you're not interested in the mind continually craving to then experience anger, to then when you're experiencing those painful feelings, to have more craving come on top of that, because the mind's trying to get back to these pleasant feelings, and it's trying to get to something that feels somewhat comfortable for the mind. And the only thing that the unenlightened mind knows is those pleasant feelings, and the way that it gets back to those is by craving. Now there's this fourth one where the Buddha talks about anger is born from anger. So this is an individual who has anger, then this arises further anger in the mind due to one not acquiring the objects of their affection. So using the same example where that somebody has anger because they have not acquired wealth, this could then arise further anger when increased promotions in one's career, increased money, lavish lifestyle, and luxury cars, clothing, jewelry, and property aren't being acquired. So not only is there anger because you don't have wealth, but now there's more anger on top of that, because now you're not getting all those other cravings fulfilled that were on top of this. And this is how the mind just basically does a downward spiral if you don't understand that this is what the mind's doing. So understanding the three poisons of craving, anger, and ignorance, eliminating craving, eliminating anger, and eliminating ignorance, this is what will produce the more peace, the more calm, the serenity and contentedness in the mind, and you will be able to circumvent all of this. So part of your journey to enlightenment is be able to observe that, yes, there's craving born from craving, there's craving that is born from anger, there's anger that is craving that is born from anger, and anger that is born from anger. This is what the Buddha is describing here, is these four things: Craving is born from craving. Anger is born from craving. Craving is born from anger, and anger is born from anger. And then when you observe this, now you can implement the solution to ensure that your mind isn't just longing and yearning, trying to get back to pleasant feelings because it's experiencing these uncomfortable, painful feelings. Or if you notice that there's a craving in the mind, you don't allow craving to stack on top of that, and so forth and so on. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can put that into Zoom by raising your hand electronically and asking any questions or follow-up questions directly. By the way, it sounds like our village is having a little party over there. If you guys hear any music that's coming through the mic, I can't do anything to stop it. The Thai people just had a big holiday last week, New Year's, and oftentimes Thai people extend holidays for longer and longer periods of time. So it sounds like they're having a party over there, and there's lots of music being played. So apologize if that's disruptive to any of you guys listening on the live stream or in Zoom. All right, it doesn't look like there's any questions coming in, so let's go to chapter 72. Is there someone who would like to read this? All right, well, I'll go ahead and read this. Oh, go ahead, Donnie.
Okay. Calm and reflection have part in true wisdom. Monks, these two qualities have part in true wisdom. What two? Calm and reflection. If cultivated, what profit does calm attain? The mind is cultivated. What profit results from a cultivated mind? All craving is abandoned. Monks, if reflection is cultivated, what profit does it attain? Wisdom is cultivated. If wisdom is cultivated, what profit does it attain? All ignorance is abandoned. A mind defiled by craving is not liberated, and wisdom defiled by ignorance or unknowing of true reality is not developed. Thus, monks, through the fading away of craving, there's liberation of mind, and through the fading away of ignorance or unknowing of true reality, there's liberation by wisdom.
Okay, thank you, Donnie. So one of the things that the Buddha is really good at is he explains the problems that you're experiencing in the mind, and then he explains the solutions of how to fix it. So in that previous chapter, he was explaining the problems that the mind experiences, that craving born out of craving, the craving that's born out of anger, and so forth and so on. He explained all of those things. Well, here he's giving you some of the solutions. He's talking about calmness and reflection and how these lead to true wisdom and liberation of the mind, essentially enlightenment. So this first one, he's saying, if calmness is cultivated, what profit does it attain? Well, the mind becomes cultivated. If you can maintain your calmness and composure in given situations, no matter what's going on in your life, whether you got in a car accident or you have a friend that's sick or ill, or if you lose your job or your child or your life partner is sick or ill or something like this, if you can maintain your calmness, this leads to a cultivated mind. And now, what profit or what results does a cultivated mind lead to? It leads to abandoning of craving. Because when your mind is shaken up with anger or sadness or any other discontent feeling, then there's craving, desire, attachment that's causing that. So where you see your mind going into this excited state, or going into any of those painful feelings like stress and anxiety and others, you would like to restrain the mind and pull it back. Maintain your calmness and composure. This is what's going to help you to eliminate craving and abandon craving. And the more craving that you abandon, then your mind won't become agitated or annoyed or disgruntled. It won't become shaken up because you've eliminated craving. So where you see your mind going into any excited states or, any those conditioned pleasant feelings, or in those conditioned painful feelings, you would like to restrain it, maintain your calmness and composure, maintain equanimity. And this is what's going to lead to the elimination of craving, which ultimately leads to continuous calmness and composure. Then the Buddha talks about reflection. What reflection is where you look inward and you look at your own mind and your own life, and you kind of figure out, what's going on that's really going well in your life. What are the wholesome things? What are the wise decisions that you are making that's leading to certain wholesome outcomes? And let me continue to make more of those decisions. And what are the unwise decisions that you're making that's leading to unwholesome outcomes? And let me stop making those unwise decisions. What you're doing here is by looking inward and doing this reflection, you're cultivating wisdom. That's what reflection leads to. So if you're just plowing through life and you don't care what you're doing or how you're doing it, and you never pause, sit on a sofa, go to a park, go on a walk by yourself, take yourself out to lunch or dinner or something like this, if you don't spend time with yourself to do that inward reflection, it's going to be very challenging for you to cultivate this wisdom, because you need to look at the things that are going well in your life based on your wise decisions leading to wholesome results, and you need to look at things that aren't going so well based on your unwise decisions that are leading to unwholesome results. And by doing that inner reflection, you can cultivate wisdom. So now if wisdom is cultivated, what profit does it attain? Well, it leads to the abandoning of all ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality. So by eliminating craving and ignorance, by practicing this calmness and this reflection, it leads to a cultivated mind and the abandoning of craving. And it leads to this abandoning of ignorance by cultivating wisdom. This is how you actually get to enlightenment. That's what the Buddha is describing here, that through the fading away of ignorance, there is liberation by wisdom. Liberation by wisdom is liberating the mind and getting to this enlightened mental state. Because whenever you're struggling, whenever you're having difficulties in life, it's just because there's some wisdom you haven't cultivated yet. That's the only thing that's going on. And because of ignorance, of course, craving exists and anger exists. These are the three poisons, or the three unwholesome roots, or the three fires. So that's why when a student first starts with me, I always share with him, don't believe anything that I say, because belief doesn't lead to enlightenment. It's wisdom that leads to the elimination of ignorance. And now when you have wisdom, you understand that craving and anger are a problem, and you start learning how to antidote that and how to fix it. That's what actually leads to enlightenment. And you can't get to that through belief. So by not believing anything on this path to enlightenment that you learn, reflect, and practice, now when you cultivate wisdom, you can now overcome these struggles and difficulties. Whatever obstacles, whatever obstructions you have in your life, you have the books, you have videos, you have podcasts, you have a Facebook group, you have the ability to reach out to your teacher by asking questions in the Facebook group, in classes, by sending a private message, scheduling personal guidance, so that whenever you're struggling or having difficulties, just understand that there's some wisdom that you're missing. And if you run away from that situation, you're ensuring that it's going to continue. Because oftentimes what the unenlightened mind does when it's struggling and having difficulty is it'll either fight or it'll run away from the situation. And when you run away from a situation that you're struggling and having difficulties in, you're just ensuring that it's going to happen again. Because typically what happens when the mind experiences anger due to craving is it'll push people away. It will either become bitter, harsh, and aggressive towards people, or you'll put your expectations on people, trying to control them to get to do things your way. Or in part of that is that you can sometimes just run away from any struggles or difficulties. But this is just ensuring that that struggle or difficulty repeats, because you haven't cultivated the wisdom of how to handle that situation. So if you reach out to your teacher, or you get involved in the teachings of the Buddha and investigate his teachings, you can cultivate the wisdom that you need in any given situation. And now when you're encountering a certain situation, you'll have the wisdom to handle that. Rather than struggle and have difficulty, you'll just be able to handle it. So sometimes when we get deep into problems, the mind can just be obsessive, and there can almost be this downward spiral. But you're not interested in that. You're interested in regularly maintaining a calm mind and regularly reflecting to cultivate this wisdom, and then taking action to attend classes, read books, do your meditation, reach out to your teacher as you need help. Because as you cultivate this wisdom, that's what's going to ultimately lead to liberation and freedom from these strong feelings, and freedom from these struggles and difficulties. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions coming in, so we'll just move to the next one. Chapter 73. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, I guess I'll go ahead and read it. So it's titled One Who Inclines Towards Nibbana, or Enlightenment. Nibbana is just the Pali way to refer to enlightenment. Monks, just as the river Ganges slants, slopes, and inclines towards the east, so too a monk who develops and cultivates the four jhanas slants, slopes, and inclines towards Nibbana, enlightenment. And how, monks, does a monk who develops and cultivates the four jhanas slant, slope, and incline towards Nibbana, enlightenment? Here, a monk distant from sense desires, distant from unwholesome mental states, enters and resides in the first jhana, which is with thinking and pondering, based in seclusion, filled with excitement and joy. And with the subsiding of thinking and pondering, by gaining inner tranquility and oneness of mind, he enters and resides in the second jhana, which is without thinking and pondering, based in concentration, filled with excitement and joy. And with the fading away of excitement, remaining imperturbable, which means unable to be upset or excited, calm and serene, mindful and clearly aware, he experiences in himself the joy of which the noble ones say, peaceful is he who resides with equanimity and mindfulness. He enters the third jhana. And having given up pleasure and pain, and with the fading away of former gladness and sadness, he enters and resides in the fourth jhana, which is beyond pleasure and pain, impurified by equanimity and mindfulness. It is in this way, monks, that a monk who develops and cultivates the four jhanas slants, slopes, and inclines towards Nibbana, enlightenment. Okay, so what he's describing here is that for somebody who enters into the jhanas, which are those four preliminary phases that the mind goes through before you get to the first stage of enlightenment, that this individual will essentially lean towards enlightenment and is very likely to move their mind towards enlightenment. Now, in the jhanas, as I mentioned, the mind can regress backwards from there. If you don't understand what the jhanas are, you might just kind of experience them, and then if you're not dedicated to what you're doing on the path, then you could potentially become complacent and your mind will slide out of those jhanas, regressing backwards. But if you understand what you're working towards, and that it's the Eightfold Path that is going to guide you to experiencing those jhanas, you can stay dedicated to learning and developing the Eightfold Path. And now as the mind moves into the jhanas, and what the Buddha is describing here is the qualities of mind that you would experience by moving into the jhanas. When you start identifying that the mind is moving into these jhanas and you know that to be true, now you start focusing on the 10 fetters and eliminating the 10 fetters so that your mind can move into that first stage of enlightenment. Because once the mind is in the first stage of enlightenment, it won't regress backwards from there. We call that first stage of enlightenment a stream enterer. And then there's once returner, non-returner, and arahant. This is the first, second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment. The reason why the Buddha referred to this as stream entry or stream enterer is because he described that as you enter into the stream, you're going to get to the ocean being Nibbana, because the streams, the rivers all lead to the ocean. So it's just like a log. If a log enters into a stream, it's going to make its way to the river and into the ocean if it doesn't get hung up in some way in terms of getting obstructed. So if you don't get obstructed, if you are cultivating the Eightfold Path and you're starting to experience the jhanas and you maintain your practice, focusing on now eliminating the 10 fetters, you will make your way to that first stage of enlightenment. And from there, your mind won't regress and you're going to get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. So staying dedicated to your practice and developing the Eightfold Path is the first part of this practice. And then as you're doing that and your mind's moving into the jhanas, you're experiencing these qualities that the Buddha is describing here. And one of the ways that I describe it is like a light bulb flickering, that you can, if you walk into a room and you turn on a light, it might flicker flicker, 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 boom, and now the light's on. So that's what you experience as the mind's moving closer and closer to this enlightened mental state, that you might get a few minutes, you might get a few hours, you might get a few days, or even a week or two where your mind is quite peaceful and quite joyful. But then, because there's still pollutions in the mind, you'll get a phone call, you'll get an email, you'll get some communication, and then boom, your mind will be discontent for one reason or another. And that's because the mind still has craving, anger, and ignorance. And now this is your opportunity in this struggle and difficulty to eliminate it. Whereas if you run away from that struggle and difficulty that you're experiencing, and you don't know what to do, because if you haven't studied these teachings, you might not know what to do when you're experiencing discontentedness from that phone call that you got. But if you have studied these teachings, you know how to cut off and let go of the discontentedness. And as you do this enough times, and you're gradually experiencing that flickering effect, more and more this gets elongated, where you get multiple days and weeks and months of peace and joy. And eventually it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and you haven't experienced any discontentedness, and you'll know that the mind is enlightened. But you'll experience this gradual flickering as you're making your way through the jhanas and into those stages of enlightenment. Even in the stages of enlightenment, you're still going to get some flickering. The mind doesn't completely eliminate all discontentedness until it gets into the fourth stage of enlightenment as an arahant. And from there onward, it will no longer experience any discontentedness. But leading up to that, you'll still experience some discontentedness, but it'll be gradually diminishing, where it'll be less frequent and less significant as you're making your way to that more and more readily. Do you guys have any questions on this chapter? You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll see that and be sure to answer your question. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here in any of our platforms. So we'll move on to the next chapter, which is chapter 74. Is there someone who would like to read this one?
I can read that, Teacher David.
Thank you, Donnie.
Great fruit and benefit of breathing mindfulness meditation. Monks, mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, when developed and cultivated, is of great fruit and benefit. And how, monks, is mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, developed and cultivated so that it is of great fruit and benefit? Here, monks, a monk, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or an empty hut, sits down. Having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body, and set up mindfulness in front of him, just mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows, I breathe in long, or breathing out long, he knows, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he knows, I breathe in short, or breathing out short, he knows, I breathe out short. He trained thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. He trained thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. He trained thus, calming the body sensations, I will breathe in. He trained thus, calming the body sensations, I will breathe out. He trained us experiencing joy, I will breathe in. He trained us experiencing joy, I will breathe out. He trained us experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe in. He trained us experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe out. He trained us experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trained us experiencing the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trains us calming the mental activity, I will breathe in. He trains us calming the mental activity, I will breathe out. He trained us experiencing the mind, I will breathe in. He trained us experiencing the mind, I will breathe out. He trains us gladdening the mind, I will breathe in. He trains us gladdening the mind, I will breathe out. He trains us concentrating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains us concentrating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains us liberating the mind, I will breathe in. He trains us liberating the mind, I will breathe out. He trains us reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe in. He trains us reflecting on impermanence, I will breathe out. He trains us reflecting on fading away, I will breathe in. He trains us reflecting on fading away, I will breathe out. He trains us reflecting on elimination, I will breathe in. He trains us reflecting on elimination, I will breathe out. He trains us reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. It trains us reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. It is this, monks, when mindfulness of breathing or breathing mindfulness meditation is developed and cultivated in this way that is of great fruit and benefit. When monks, mindfulness of breathing or breathing mindfulness meditation has been developed and cultivated in this way, one of two fruits may be predicted, either final knowledge or wisdom in this very life, or if there is a residue of clinging, the state of non-returner.
Okay, thank you, Donnie. So this is the Buddha's guidance on developing a breathing mindfulness meditation practice. And he's going through and guiding you about how to develop that practice. So let's look at it. I explore this in a lot of detail in volume 7. In this particular chapter in this book, I don't break it down, but I'll break it down here in class for you guys and show you what he's actually guiding you to do. But if you'd like to see it in written form, it's in volume 7 of the book series. So here, the Buddha is saying that developing a breathing mindfulness meditation practice leads to this great fruit and benefit, which he describes at the very end of the chapter. But here in the middle, he's describing how to actually develop your meditation practice. During his lifetime, people would go to the forest, to a foot of a tree, in an empty hut and sit down. Today, we might go to our bedroom, our living room, we might go to a park, we might go to a temple, we might go to a cave, we might go to all different kinds of places. But this is what the Buddha did during his lifetime, is he went to the forest. So he's guiding people to either go to a forest, to a foot of a tree, or to an empty hut and sit down. And of course, there's seated position, lying, standing, and walking positions that he taught. But here he's teaching the sitting position. Then he says, cross your legs, which we do when we sit on the floor, straighten the body, right? Not real rigid and not slouch, but straighten the body. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. And then set up mindfulness in front of you. What mindfulness is awareness of mind. What you would like to do is set up some awareness of mind as you ease into meditation. You're not interested in just plopping down into meditation because there you don't have awareness of mind. So what I use in order to set up mindfulness in front of me is I use chanting, that this helps you to develop awareness of mind and awareness of breath as you're easing into meditation. But you might use something else. You might use chanting or you might use something else, but you're not interested in just plopping down into meditation. You would like to bring some awareness to the mind as you sit down into meditation or whatever position that you take. And then, being mindful and aware of the mind, you would like to start breathing in and breathing out. This is establishing the breath. Okay, so that's the first part that he's teaching you here, is body positioning and starting to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose to start establishing the breath, that nice, steady, consistent breath. Then, once you've developed your breath, he brings his attention to the breath, or she, right? It doesn't matter what gender. He's teaching men, so he's using that pronoun, but we could insert any pronoun here. What he teaches here is that if your breath is long or if it's short, know that it's long or know that it's short. Essentially what he's saying is bring your attention, bring your focus of the mind to the breath and start focusing on the breath. Then, as you're in meditation, you might experience bodily sensations, because as you're experiencing the whole body, you might feel an itch or you might feel something else in the body that you feel like that you're noticing. This is experiencing the body. You're noticing the whole body. But when you're noticing those things, he's saying, stay focused on the breath. So experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. Continue to focus on the breath. Keep your mind focused on the breath, even though you're experiencing certain bodily sensations in the body. And as you notice those bodily sensations, calm them. So where you're in meditation and you have a certain itch that arises, you might have this urge to hurry up and scratch it. But what you would like to do is just know that that itch is impermanent and just calm the mind, because that itch is actually coming to the mind. And as you're experiencing the whole body, you would like to calm the bodily sensations. If you feel pain in the body, that's different. You would like to shift and change or change body positions. You're not interested in maintaining pain in the body, because the pain is the way for the body to tell the mind that something's wrong and you need to take action to change and adjust it. But if you're just noticing some bodily sensations like an itch or something like that, the Buddha is saying stay focused on the breath and calm that bodily sensation. Don't give in to that urge to hurry up and scratch it. So now, as you're starting to do that, you might start experiencing this joy and peacefulness come into the mind, because now you're starting to focus the mind on the breath. You're noticing the bodily sensations, but you're not itching those. You're just calming the bodily sensations. And now when you notice this joy or peacefulness arise in the mind, the Buddha is saying continue to stay focused on the breath. Sometimes when you're first training and your mind starts moving into these various qualities where you start noticing the joy and peacefulness, you might try to indulge in that. You're like, oh my goodness, here comes the joy. Oh wow, that feels so great, right? But that's a conditioned feeling. Or you might notice this peacefulness and this stillness come into the mind, and you might be like, oh my goodness, wow, there's that peacefulness. Oh, it feels so great. That's what I've been working for, right? But if you allow the mind to indulge like that, that joy and peacefulness is not permanent at this point, because you're just starting to experience it. So when you're not experiencing that joy and peacefulness, the mind's going to move to those painful feelings. If you allow it to have pleasant feelings when you experience the joy and peacefulness. So as the joy and peacefulness is coming into the mind and you're starting to experience that, the Buddha is saying continue to focus on the breath. He trains thus, experiencing joy, I will breathe in. So just continue to focus on the breath. Same thing, experiencing peacefulness, I will breathe in. So even though you're experiencing that, don't allow the mind to indulge in it. Just remain unaffected. And that's what will ensure that the joy and peacefulness will continue. So as you observe that the joy and peacefulness is coming in, it's just kind of like, okay, there's the joy, there's the peacefulness. But stay focused on the breath. Don't indulge in it and allow the mind to get those conditioned pleasant feelings, because then it's only a matter of time before that joy and peacefulness is gone, and now you're going to experience conditioned painful feelings. Then the Buddha talks about as you experience mental activity, that then you calm this mental activity. In other parts of his teachings, he talks about that when you're in meditation and the mind moves off the breath, to cut it off and let it go. Here he's using the term calming the mental activity, that even when you're an enlightened being, you will experience a certain amount of mental activity in the mind. You can't meditate and not have any thoughts whatsoever. As long as you're alive, you will have thoughts. But you can quiet the mind and you can still the mind. So when you're experiencing mental activity, the Buddha is saying, calm that mental activity. Continue to stay focused on the breath, the in-breath and the out-breath. Don't allow your mind to indulge in that mental activity. So if there's a thought, cut that off, let it go, calm that mental activity, and bring the mind back to the breath. Now, as you experience the mind, then the Buddha explains to gladden the mind. So as you're now getting deeper and deeper into your meditation, you're noticing mental activity happening, you're cutting that off and bringing it back to the breath, and you're starting to experience more quietness and more stillness in the mind. And of course, as you're first starting, there's a bombardment of thoughts, but as you train over a number of months and years, you get to that peacefulness and more stillness in the mind. And now you're starting to experience the natural qualities of the mind, because that peacefulness and joy is arising, right? So you're starting to experience the mind now. And the Buddha is saying, gladden the mind and concentrate the mind. So as you're bringing in the gladdening of the mind and you're maintaining your focus on the breath, continue to focus on the breath, developing concentration, and continue to focus on the in-breath and the out-breath. And now what this leads to is liberation. The mind starts to become liberated, that you're no longer experiencing these strong feelings that happen, this bombardment of thoughts. The mind is becoming free of those strong feelings. And as you experience that liberation and more peacefulness and joy coming into the mind, more calmness, just continue to stay focused on the breath. Don't indulge in that peacefulness and that joy. You can observe that it's there and know that it's there without indulging in it and allowing the mind to get conditioned pleasant feelings because of it. Then, as you're continuing in meditation, you would like to then understand that as certain things are happening in meditation, understand that they're impermanent and train the mind to let go. So say you're in meditation and you're deep in meditation, you're focused on the breath, all this joy and peacefulness is coming into the mind, but then you hear a truck go by and they honk the horn. Well, if you have a craving for quietness, when you hear that honking of the horn, you might get agitated or annoyed or irritated. But what you should do in that situation is reflect on impermanence. Understand that that horn honking is impermanent. Understand that it's going to fade away, and eliminate any kind of arising discontent feelings that are resulting of that. Let it go. That's what the Buddha is saying. So that as you're experiencing certain sights or sounds or odors or flavors, bodily contact or certain mental activity, understand that all this stuff is impermanent. Continue to stay focused on the breath. Understand that all this stuff is going to fade away. Eliminate any arising discontentedness by letting go. Just let it go, let it go, let it go. Continue to stay focused on the breath. And now what this leads to, as you train your mind in this way with breathing mindfulness meditation, is it leads to either final knowledge in this very life, or if there's a residual clinging, the state of non-returning. What final knowledge is this is someone who's actually enlightened. If you've attained final knowledge, then the mind is enlightened. And what you're gaining final knowledge about is the path to enlightenment. That as you're on your journey to enlightenment, you're cultivating all this wisdom about the path to enlightenment. All the various things that you need to learn, slowly but surely and gradually over time, you're cultivating more and more wisdom about the path to enlightenment. But by the time you've eliminated all the 10 fetters in the mind, you have now attained final knowledge. And you'll know that that's the case because the mind won't be experiencing discontentedness for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or what have you. And what you have now is you have full awareness and full wisdom of the path to enlightenment. You would be able to speak about the teachings with ease because your mind has cultivated this wisdom about the path to enlightenment. And now the mind is liberated. The mind is an arahant, or you've attained arahantship. But if for some reason you fall short of that, then the Buddha is saying if there's any residual clinging, then you will attain this state of non-returning, which is the third stage of enlightenment. And here, an individual is reborn into the heavenly realm, and they attain enlightenment from that realm. But the ideal thing would be that you attain final knowledge in this very life, get to enlightenment now, so that there is no rebirth. Because you're not going to necessarily know for yourself whether your mind is 100% a non-returner or not, because there could be some other craving and clinging that you're not aware of. So rather than trying to stop short in order to get to heaven and get enlightened there, which is not ideal, what would be ideal is to continue in this life, continue to cultivate the mind and train the mind so that you can get to final knowledge, you can eliminate all 10 fetters, and you can experience liberation and freedom of mind in this life. That way, from the point that you attain enlightenment, you will enjoy the rest of this life with a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. If you fall short of that, even in the stage of non-returner, these beings are still experiencing discontentedness to a certain degree. So that means you're still going to be irritated. You're still going to be annoyed. As a non-returner, you're not experiencing anger and hostility and bitterness. Your mind's not there. It's significantly diminished, but you're still irritated every now and again. And in the stage of non-returning, you can actually become quite complacent because you're only probably experiencing discontentedness maybe once every 3 to 6 months. And it's very minor, it's very insignificant, and you can eliminate it pretty quickly. But in that stage, because you're not experiencing discontentedness very frequently, you can become complacent. And what you would like to do is not allow the mind to do that. So where you see that you still even have discontentedness of any type, even the slightest little ickiness, you would like to maintain your motivation and enthusiasm to make it all the way to final knowledge, eliminating all 10 fetters, getting to enlightenment, so then your mind can be peaceful and joyful for the entire rest of this life. And you can enjoy that mental state with your friends and your family, being around people. You'll have wonderful relationships with everybody around you. What questions do you guys have on this chapter? Okay, it looks like we have some questions here on Facebook. Amina's asking, greetings, teacher. What do you think about doing a mental scan of the body at the start of meditation? Read an article that shared this might be a good practice and interested in your thoughts. Thanks. Yeah, the way that I think about this is kind of like reflecting on the mind and kind of observing the mind. That's essentially what it means to set up mindfulness in front of you, that you're becoming aware of the mind before you start meditating. So that's what that article potentially is describing based on the way that you're wording your question. And that can be really beneficial for you in order to cultivate mindfulness before you ease into meditation. So if that's something you would like to do, that would be helpful to set up mindfulness in front of you. Here's a question from Parikashit. He says, Venerable Teacher, do we also need to follow this order while practicing or remember all these cases while meditating? The answer is that if you learn what the Buddha taught, it's surely helpful. Anytime that you learn anything that the Buddha taught in his own words, it's surely helpful. But to remember each one of these steps one by one, it's oftentimes very challenging for the mind. So that's why I kind of boil it down into very simple instructions that when I do guidance, that when a student's just starting out, I have kind of like a series of 3 or 4 things that I'm guiding a student to do in meditation, and that gets you to the same goal of what the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha's teaching it in a lot more detail, but I summarize it in a way that gets you to the same results without having to memorize that extensive detail. So if you did memorize it, there's certainly no harm in that, but don't feel like you have to, because if you're meditating in the way that I guide, that a student would meditate, then you're accomplishing those same things, but it's just doing it in a more consolidated approach where you don't have to remember all those details. So great questions there, guys. Thank you for those. Let's see. It looks like we have a question in Zoom. Christine, if you'd like to go ahead.
Hello, teacher. Thank you for sharing all this. I have 2 questions. The first one is, every time or most of the time, when I drop into a deeper peaceful state in meditation, my mind is like, oh, hopefully the timer is not going to ring right now. Hopefully I have a lot of time, but then I'm out again. And I can't stop this one. And it happens really often, to be honest. I try to focus on the breath and stay with the breath when this thought happens, but this thought is so disturbing, but it's so, it's so quick, and then it's already there.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why I don't recommend using a timer in most situations. If you don't need a timer, don't use a timer, because you'll either be sitting in meditation, thinking, is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? And the mind's longing and yearning and craving to know if it's time yet. Or you'll be deep in meditation, getting all kinds of benefits, and then boom, the timer will go off. So if you don't need a timer, it's best to not use one, because then you can just reap the benefits of whatever you're experiencing in meditation. But occasionally, some people are going to need a timer, particularly if they're on their way to work or something like this. And if that's the case and they're in meditation, they're experiencing the benefits that you're experiencing, what you're describing, Christine, is what you would do in those rare situations where you might need to use a timer and you're starting to experience the peacefulness and joy. Rather than think, oh my goodness, don't let the timer go off, because you're indulging in that peacefulness and joy, don't allow the mind to do that. That's the mind craving and trying to hold on to this peacefulness and joy. So as long as you're craving for the peace and joy, it will go away. It will be impermanent. But if you're like, all right, interesting, there's the peace and joy. Don't think about the timer. Don't think about, oh my goodness, I want to hold on to this for as long as I can. Don't think about any of that stuff, because that's craving, desire, attachment. Just when you observe the peace and joy or whatever improved mental qualities you're experiencing in meditation, just continue to stay focused on the breath, unaffected by those improved mental qualities. And it's really kind of like adverse to what we're typically taught as we're growing up and as we're in the unenlightened state. If we do something and we apply effort and we get some benefit or result, we're taught to get excited, like, oh my goodness, look what I got, yay, right? But that's not what you're interested in doing here. You're going to apply all this work and all this effort to learn and practice and train the mind. And now as these qualities are coming into the mind, you just reside unaffected. And you might smile, you might be like, there's the peacefulness, nice, okay. And you just stay focused on the breath. So you can actually enjoy the peace and the joy that's coming into the mind without allowing conditioned pleasant feelings to occur. Because as soon as you allow that to occur, those peace and joy is going to be impermanent. It's going to fade away. So if you would like to maintain the peace and joy long term, the way to do that is to reside unaffected when the peace and joy comes in, so that you don't allow the mind to continue to crave. Because as soon as craving arises, the peace and joy is going to fade away. You'll need to unmute yourself, Christine. I had to mute you. There's like a sound there.
Thank you very much. This was really helpful. Yeah, solution is so simple to just not use the timer. It never occurred to me. Thank you for pointing that out. Second question is actually about the chapter that we were discussing before. It just took me a while to reflect on it. Can I still ask that?
Sure.
Okay. So as you were talking about this flickering light bulb, I'm wondering what it is that I kept on experiencing through the last few months. It's like there's some moments, and they're really brief usually, where I realize that everything is actually fine, and all the rest is just my thoughts, and it has nothing to do with reality. And there comes such a joy, something like that. It's really hard to describe. Is that what we're aiming for, to have this more, or is that?
Yeah, it sounds like your mind might be starting to kind of get glimpses of the jhanas. Just like before the mind is enlightened, you get glimpses of enlightenment. And then same thing is when you're in the jhanas, you will experience, before getting into the jhanas, you will experience glimpses of what the jhanas are like before the mind actually enters into the jhanas. So this is the light bulb flickering that you experience. So where you notice that unconditioned joy, like you wake up in the morning and you're just joyful. There's no reason why you're joyful. Nothing's happened. You're not thinking about anything in particular, but you just notice like, wow, the mind is so joyful. Or there's so much peace. It's like, wow, you're not thinking about anything particular. This is unconditioned joy or unconditioned peacefulness. And it's like, interesting. You're not interested in indulging in that and be like, yay, the joy is back, yay, the peace is back, because that's the conditioned feeling of excitement that now it's going to ensure the joy and the peacefulness goes away as soon as you allow the mind to do that. So if you wake up in the morning and you're gathering your thoughts like, the mind's quite joyful, it's quite peaceful, nice, and you just move on. And you continue to experience that joy and peacefulness for longer and longer periods of time, because you're not allowing the mind to indulge in any kind of pleasant feelings based in craving. So that is what you would like to do, is experience these more and more elongated periods where there's unconditioned joy and unconditioned peacefulness, along with all those other qualities that I talk about with the enlightened mind. And the way to ensure that you do maintain those mental states is don't indulge in them. You can observe that they're there. You can know that they're there. Be appreciative that they're there. Even have improved motivation that, yeah, everything that I'm doing is leading exactly where the Buddha said it would. Okay, you can observe those things without indulging in these conditioned pleasant feelings. And that's what's going to ensure these peacefulness and this joy and calmness and composure is lasting for longer and longer periods of time.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful.
You're welcome. All right, let me look at Facebook and YouTube one more time before we move on. Let's see. All right, I don't see any more questions there. So let's move on to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read chapter 75? Christine, your hand's still up. I imagine that was from your... Is that for reading? Is that for reading?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Go ahead and read.
Okay. So breathing mindfulness meditation, an excellent and peaceful dwelling. The Buddha commented on the increases of monks dying through suicide by themselves or by encouraging and assisting others to do so. On this occasion, the perfectly enlightened one had given them the discourses of Anapanasati, breathing mindfulness meditation. Monks, this concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, when developed and cultivated, is peaceful and superb, an excellent and peaceful dwelling, and it dissolves and extinguishes right on the spot evil, unwholesome states whenever they arise. Just as monks in the last months of the hot season, when a mass of dust and dirt has swirled up, a great rain cloud of the season disperses it and extinguishes it on the spot, so too concentration by mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, when developed and cultivated, is peaceful and superb, an excellent and peaceful dwelling, and it dissolves and extinguishes on the spot evil, unwholesome states whenever they arise. And how is this so?
By the way, this is the same exact thing that we just read, Christine, but if you'd like to read it, you can go ahead and read it.
Here, monks, a monk, having gone to the forest, to the foot of a tree, or to an empty hut, sits down. Having folded his legs crosswise, straightened his body and set up mindfulness in front of him, just mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. Breathing in long, he knows I breathe in long. Breathing out long, he knows I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he knows I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he knows I breathe out short. He trains thus, experiencing the whole body. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe in. He trains thus, reflecting on letting go, I will breathe out. In this way, monks, that concentration by mindfulness of breathing is developed and cultivated so that it is peaceful and superb, an excellent and peaceful dwelling, and it dissolves and extinguishes on the spot evil, unwholesome states whenever they arise.
Okay, thank you, Christine. So this discourse is something that the Buddha taught when people came to him and they advised him that people were committing suicide, that some of his students were either committing suicide or there were people assisting others to commit suicide. Because if you understand about awakening to enlightenment, that if you're trying to awaken to enlightenment on your own, this oftentimes leads to suicidal thoughts. What you should do if you're experiencing any kind of things like that, you should reach out to your teacher for guidance to get help. And what a teacher would guide you is to practice breathing mindfulness meditation, because it eliminates evil, unwholesome mental states or any unwholesome mental states right on the spot, that you can train your mind to the point where not only if you're having suicidal thoughts, but if you're having any kind of cravings, desires, attachments, that any kind of thoughts like that are arising, maybe shopping or sexual thoughts or gambling or any kind of unwholesome thoughts, maybe drinking or indulging in drugs or intoxicants or things like that, you can train your mind to eliminate those unwholesome states, because it'll eliminate craving, desire, attachment, and that's what leads to the elimination of these unwholesome mental states. So being interested in wanting to kill yourself through suicide or assisting others to do so, this is a craving for extermination of life. And if somebody chooses to do that, it's going to produce all kinds of problems and difficulties. Most often those beings are reborn into lower realms, and now the pain and the painful feelings just continue. So as you're awakening, if you're struggling or having any difficulties with the mind, you reach out to a teacher to get help rather than try to look for suicide, because suicide isn't a solution. It actually makes the problem worse, because there's continuous rebirth over and over and over and over and over again, most likely in the lower realms, which once you're in the lower realms, it's very hard to get back out. So now that you're in this human state, it would be unwise to waste it through suicide. Instead, train your mind, and using breathing mindfulness meditation is what will help you to eliminate those evil, unwholesome thoughts. So if you're trying to work on any particular cravings, let's say something simple, like say you're trying to give up coffee because you know that caffeine is unwise and it's just going to promote an excited mind, and it's a stimulant, it's a drug, and you're interested in getting rid of that. And now maybe you've been building up your meditation practice and it's been a week or 2 or 3 that you haven't had any coffee, and now you feel this urge to go out and buy a coffee. Well, if you get into breathing mindfulness meditation, this can dispel that unwholesome mental state where you can eliminate that craving on the spot. That's what the Buddha is describing. If you've never meditated at all and you try to use breathing mindfulness meditation, oftentimes it's not going to work to just immediately eliminate this craving from the mind. That's not the way that this works. But if you've been consistently training over a consistent long-term period and you see certain cravings arise, you can move into meditation and you can eliminate them on the spot, the way that the Buddha is describing here. Any questions on this particular chapter? Okay, it looks like Christine, do you still have a hand up for a question, or was that from before?
Oops, sorry, it's from before now.
That's okay. Donnie, I see your hand is up as well. If you'd like to go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Teacher David. Down here, I heard you mention that during this path of enlightenment, after learning through things, some people might have a tendency to have suicidal thoughts. May I know why is that so?
Yeah, what happens is the more you become aware, I should preface it this way. It's not that the path to enlightenment is creating suicidal thoughts. It's that the mind is having certain cravings and it can't get those fulfilled, right? So as the mind is experiencing any suicidal thoughts, whether you're on this path or not, even if you're off the path, the person typically isn't interested in dying. They're just interested in getting rid of the painful thoughts. And they don't know how to do that. An untrained mind, the only way that an untrained mind knows how to get rid of painful thoughts is to crave something and get to those pleasant feelings, and it makes the problem worse. And eventually this individual gets so deep into cravings, and they're so significant that their painful feelings become so significant that they might see the only option is to kill themselves and to experience suicide. So it's not that going on the path to enlightenment produces suicidal thoughts, but as you're working on the path to enlightenment, you're learning about craving, desire, attachments, and you're learning to restrain the mind and pull it back. And as you're doing this work, it can become pretty intense, where before you were on the path, if you had a certain craving, you might just indulge in that craving and you get what you want most of the time or some of the time, and you can feel those pleasant feelings. But while you're on the path to enlightenment and you realize what the problem is and you're constantly restraining the mind, you might actually experience discontentedness, a lot of it coming up in the mind, certain painful feelings that people can actually experience, deep sadness as they're making progress and doing work on the path to enlightenment, because they're restraining the mind so much and the mind isn't getting what it wants so frequently that it can experience a lot of painful feelings. So breathing mindfulness meditation will help you to eliminate the cravings so you won't have those significant cravings that lead to painful feelings. But also, one of the other methods that I teach students is that sometimes it makes sense to just give the mind what it wants. Let me think of an example. I'll use a very obvious one that I think some people might be able to relate to. If somebody is trying to eliminate sexual cravings, for example, and you've gotten to the point in your practice where you've decided you're going to eliminate sexual cravings, but prior to that, when your mind would get angry or sad or frustrated, you might have indulged in sex. And this is a way to get pleasant feelings, that when you experience painful feelings, you go to sex and that instantly brings some pleasant feelings in the mind. And this is what your mind's used to. But now you're starting to train the mind to not have sex. and you're starting to restrain the mind and pull it back, and you're feeling all this discontentedness because of it, because you don't have that outlet of going to sex. And now maybe it's been 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or two, and you haven't had sex, and your mind's just really discontent. Well, if you keep restraining the mind and doing breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and other things, this discontentedness can just keep piling up and piling up and piling up. With that and other cravings that aren't getting fulfilled, somebody might think that suicide is a viable option, but I'm sharing that it's not. So you can use breathing, mindfulness, meditation, but the other thing you can do is just go ahead and have sex or masturbation or whatever else that you're going to do. It's kind of like if you had a dam and the water was building and building and building and building and building, the dam is under more and more pressure. And what they do in order to solve this is they open the doors a little bit and they let some of the water out. And now the water drops down, and then they close the doors again because now they've released some of the pressure from the dam. Whereas if they allow the water to keep growing, keep building, it'll break open the dam and it'll be busted. And now they have to invest all that money to be able to fix the dam. So your mind is the same way, whether it's about sexual cravings or you're trying to eliminate coffee or any other kind of cravings that you are experiencing. If you've got a good 2, 3, 4 weeks or a month or whatever, and you haven't indulged in that craving, but you're feeling the pressure build and build and build, one of the things you can do is just kind of allow the mind to fulfill its craving and then get right back into it, where now you go, instead of 1 month, maybe now you go to 6 weeks or 2 months, and now you feel the pressure build and build and build, and then maybe you indulge in that craving for a little bit. And we're talking about things that aren't leading to harm. We're talking about, things like sex or coffee or things like this. We're not talking about cocaine or heroin or crystal meth, some of these really destructive things. I wouldn't advise you in the same way. But when you have these other types of cravings, if you feel a lot of pressure building, you can actually lower that by just allowing the mind to indulge in the craving. But also you should be maintaining this breathing, mindfulness, meditation practice as the Buddha is describing here, because that's what's ultimately going to eliminate the craving. Allowing the mind to indulge in the craving will release some of the pressure in the mind, but it's not going to eliminate the craving. You're going to have to restrain the mind, and that's where the breathing mindfulness meditation will fix the problem. Indulging in the craving, even after a month or two, it's lowering the pressure in the mind and taking away some of the agitation, but it's not actually solving the problem. It's just kind of giving you a little bit of a respite or a reprieve from the discontentedness that is arising.
And thank you so much, teacher.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, under no circumstances would I advise anyone to look at suicide or any of that stuff. Just reach out to a teacher as you guys need help if you're feeling really discontent, if you're thinking about any kind of harmful things to the body. If it's not me, reach out to a suicide hotline or somebody else, a friend, a family member that can help you, because suicide is never the solution, because it's going to just lead to rebirth, and most likely in the lower realms, and it's going to be really hard to get back to the human realm. Now you're in the human realm, you can eliminate the cravings that are producing those painful feelings and eliminate the painful feelings. Death doesn't eliminate the painful feelings. All right, so let's move to the next chapter then, since I'm not seeing any other questions. This is chapter 76. Is there someone who would like to read this chapter? Okay, so I'll go ahead and read this chapter. It's titled, A Monk Who Is Not Lacking of Jhana. Monks, if for just the time of a finger snap, a monk develops mindfulness of breathing mindfulness meditation, he is called a monk who is not lacking of jhana, who acts upon the teachings of the teacher, who responds to his advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food, having produced no results or benefits. How much more than those who cultivate it? So here, what the Buddha is describing is that if you stay dedicated to breathing mindfulness meditation and you act upon all the other teachings, like the Eightfold Path, and you receive and respond to the guidance of your teacher, then you will experience these jhanas. The mind will move into these jhanas. And if you cultivate breathing mindfulness meditation on a regular, consistent basis, then it will lead to the production and experiencing the jhanas. And as you heard in the previous chapter, getting into the jhanas leans and slants and slopes towards enlightenment. So initially, you're putting together the Eightfold Path in order to get to the jhanas. And then once you're in the jhanas, you're more directly focusing on the 10 fetters to get in the first stage of enlightenment and beyond. And that's kind of how you progress. And the Buddha here is describing that one who does not eat the alms food having produced no benefits, because during his lifetime, he's relying on the donations of the country people, the villagers, the household practitioners making offerings and donations to be able to then train their own mind, get deep in their own practice, and then cultivating that wisdom, they can offer that wisdom back to the household practitioners as a way to help them. So if you're relying on donations of your students in order to sustain your life, you should cultivate your own practice and develop your own practice. And then you will have produced results and benefits in your own mind. And then as you see that, then you have wisdom to now offer to your students to help them. So it's important that if somebody's living on donations and support of other people to develop their practice, that they don't become complacent, that you maintain your practice, because you developing your practice is going to help you to get closer and closer to enlightenment by cultivating this wisdom. But it's also going to help your students and the people who are donating food, clothing, water, shelter, medical care, things like this to you in order to help you get deeper in your practice. That's the Gama. The students are offering and making offerings to you. You get really deep into your practice, gain lots and lots of wisdom, and then you offer the teachings back to the students. That's the mutual support that the Buddha created. And having done this, the Buddha is saying that this alms food hasn't gone to waste, and you've cultivated your practice through breathing mindfulness meditation in order to get to the jhanas. But as I've shared, you would need much more than just breathing mindfulness meditation to get to the jhanas. You would need all the various steps of the Eightfold Path. Are there any questions on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So let's move to the next one, which is chapter 77. Is there anyone who would like to read this one?
I can read it.
Great, thank you, Christine.
Breathing in and breathing out is a certain kind of body. Whenever Ananda, a monk, when breathing in long, knows, I breathe in long. Or when breathing out long, knows, I breathe out long. When breathing in short, knows, I breathe in short. Or when breathing out short, knows, I breathe out short. When he trains thus, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe in. When he trains us, experiencing the whole body, I will breathe out. When he trains us, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe in. When he trains us, calming the bodily sensations, I will breathe out. On that occasion, the monk recites reflecting on the body in the body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world. For what reason? I call this a certain kind of body, Ananda, that is, breathing in and breathing out. Therefore, Ananda, on that occasion the monk recites reflecting on the body in the body, dedicated, clearly comprehending, mindful, having removed craving and displeasure in regard to the world.
Thank you, Christine. So here what the Buddha is describing is cultivating the four foundations of mindfulness, that those bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. This is something that I teach in the group learning program and also here in the Pali Canon and English study group, that you learn about these 4 foundations of mindfulness, because you're going to need to be aware of all 4 foundations. And that's what's going to ultimately lead to you being able to cut off and let go of discontentedness as it's arising. So if you can be aware of the bodily sensations in meditation, and you know that they're there, and then you can cut off and let go of any arising thoughts or ideas or agitation or discontentedness that is arising due to arising bodily sensations, now you've developed the ability in meditation to be aware of bodily sensations and being able to control the mind and restrain it to cut off and let go of any discontentedness. And if you're able to do that in meditation, now you can move that into daily life. That in daily life, when you feel the bodily sensations associated with something like anger or frustration or irritation or other discontent feelings, even those pleasant feelings have certain bodily sensations that are occurring prior to the feeling coming into the mind. So if you can observe those bodily sensations that are happening before those conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings are neither painful nor pleasant, now you can cut off and let go of arising discontentedness as a bodily sensation. And if you do that enough times, then you will have eliminated the cravings, desires, attachments that are producing that, and the mind will no longer experience discontent feelings. Because if you miss it as a bodily sensation, it's going to become a feeling. And then if it becomes a feeling and you don't cut it off there, it's going to affect the condition of the mind for a few hours or a few days or a week or so. If you've ever been angry for like a week or two, you know what that third foundation of mindfulness is, which is the condition of the mind is affected. And then it starts forming this mental object. So being aware of all 4 of these 4 foundations is utterly important in order to get to enlightenment. Without awareness of those 4 foundations of mindfulness, you wouldn't have the tools and the awareness of mind that you need in order to actively train the mind. So be sure that you understand what those 4 foundations are, and that more and more you cultivate the ability to be aware of the bodily sensations that are occurring prior to any discontentedness arising as a feeling in the mind. Are there any questions on this chapter? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions in any of our platforms. So I will go ahead and move to the next chapter, chapter 78. I'll go ahead and read this one, and then if you guys would like to volunteer on the next one, that'd be great. It's titled Mindfulness of the Body. Here, a monk gone to the forest or to the foot of a tree or to an empty hut sits down, having folded his legs crosswise, set his body erect, in established mindfulness in front of him. Ever mindful he breathes in, mindful he breathes out. Breathing in long, he understands, I breathe in long. Or breathing out long, he understands, I breathe out long. Breathing in short, he understands, I breathe in short. Or breathing out short, he understands, I breathe out short. He trains thus, I shall breathe in, experiencing the whole body. He trains thus, I shall breathe out, experiencing the whole body. He trains thus, I shall breathe in, calming the bodily sensations. He trains thus, I shall breathe out, calming the bodily sensations. As he resides thus diligent, dedicated, and determined, his memories and thoughts based on the household life are abandoned. With their abandoning, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. That is how a monk develops mindfulness of the body. So here, the Buddha is once again describing the development of those bodily sensations and awareness of them. That in meditation, you're developing the ability to observe the bodily sensations. And when you're experiencing those bodily sensations, you then calm them. You would need to cut off and let go. And this is a quality that you're going to then be able to practice in daily life as part of the Eightfold Path, that as you experience the bodily sensations of any discontentedness, either pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant feelings are arising, you cut that off and let it go. And if you can get to the point where you're aware of the bodily sensations and you're able to cut them off and let them go sooner and sooner, both in meditation and outside, you're very close to enlightenment. It's not going to be tomorrow, it's not going to be next week, but in the next several months or in the next few years, you will be experiencing enlightenment if you can get to the point where you can observe those bodily sensations and cut off and let go of the discontentedness that is arising, that bodily sensation is cluing you into. Essentially, the bodily sensation is like a red light on the dashboard of your car, and it's alerting you to, hey, something's wrong. You should pull over and investigate this. And sometimes you can figure it out yourself. Other times you need to take it into a mechanic and get a mechanic to take a look at it. And sometimes you can figure out your cravings, desires, attachments yourself. Other time you might need help from a teacher. So you reach out to your teacher for help. And as you do this, remaining diligent, dedicated, and determined to developing your awareness of the bodily sensations and cutting them off and letting them go, what the Buddha is describing here is that the memories and thoughts based on the household life are abandoned. Essentially, what he's describing is these ordained practitioners who came out of the household life, if they're longing and yearning and having cravings to be in their household life, this can all be eliminated through training the mind, through understanding and being aware of those bodily sensations, and then cutting them off and letting them go. So it's not just the thoughts of household life are abandoned, but it's cravings, desires, attachments are eliminated when you're aware of the bodily sensations and you can cut it off and let it go there. You will gradually train the mind to eliminate all cravings, desires, attachments. You will always have memories in your mind. The path to enlightenment isn't about eliminating memories, but you'll eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments, the clinging and holding on to these memories. But significant things that happen in your life, you will still remember those things. But if it was, say, a traumatic event that happened to you in the past and you experienced that, you'll still remember that that event happened, but it won't shake up your mind in the present moment. By training your mind to be aware of the bodily sensations that are occurring as discontentedness is getting ready to come into the mind, and then cutting it off and letting it go there. So the way that you do that is you bring your mind to be steady and internally quieted and brought to singleness and concentration by focusing on the breath. Any questions on this chapter? All right, let's go to the next chapter, which is chapter 79. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, I'll go ahead and read this one. It's titled, One Who Has Developed and Cultivated Mindfulness of the Body. Again, monks, when walking, a monk understands, I am walking. When standing, he understands, I am standing. When sitting, he understands, I am sitting. When lying down, he understands, I am lying down. Or he understands accordingly, however his body is positioned. Again, monks, a monk is one who acts in full awareness when going forward and returning, who acts in full awareness when looking ahead and looking away, who acts in full awareness when flexing and extending his limbs, who acts in full awareness when wearing his robes and carrying his outer robe in bowl, who acts in full awareness when eating, drinking, consuming food, and tasting, who acts in full awareness when defecating or urinating, who acts in full awareness when walking, standing, sitting, falling asleep, waking up, talking, and keeping silent. As he resides thus diligent, dedicated, and determined, his memories and thoughts based on the household life are abandoned. With their abandoning, his mind becomes steadied internally, quieted, brought to singleness, and concentrated. That too is how a monk develops mindfulness of the body. Monks, anyone who has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body, has included within himself whatever wholesome states there are that lead to true wisdom. Just as anyone who has extended his mind over the great ocean has included within it whatever streams there are that flow into the ocean, so too, anyone who has developed and cultivated mindfulness of the body has included within himself whatever wholesome states there are that lead to true wisdom. In addition, it was also mentioned that to develop reflection on unattractiveness of the body 32-part body meditation, and to develop the first jhana all the way to the fourth jhana are also considered as developing mindfulness of the body. So here, the Buddha is once again just kind of talking about developing mindfulness of the body, and he's coupling it with developing singleness of mind, because it's concentration in developing singleness of mind that will ultimately help you to have more mindfulness and awareness of mind. So you would like to be able to practice singleness of mind in daily life, that you're fully aware of what you're doing, that you're aware of your bodily movements, that you're aware of your speech, that you're aware of your intentions, you're aware of what's going on in the mind. That's what he's getting to here, is that you ensure that no matter what you're doing, you're fully aware and you're putting your wisdom into everything that you're doing. Whether it's your intentions, your speech, or your actions in daily life, you would like to bring forth all the wisdom of the natural law of karma in ensuring that you're practicing such a way that is harmless. That way, by you practicing harmlessness, you're not harming others and harm won't come back to you. You'll be able to extinguish all your unwholesome karma and then experience more peace and joy in your daily life. Are there any questions on this chapter? Okay. Looks like Amina is just making a statement here, thanking for encouraging singleness of mind, going for walks. It continues to be a helpful practice. Yes, indeed. So while you're walking your dog, while you're out on a walk by yourself or with your children, you just focus on one thing at a time. And this is what I guided Amina to probably over a year ago or 2 years ago by now, that instead of walking and listening to music and, looking at this thing or that thing or listening even to a podcast, instead, just walk. And if you notice a bird, okay, there's a bird. If you notice a car going by, honking the horn, okay, there's a car. If you're walking with your child or your life partner, you're holding hands, okay, you're walking and holding hands. So you can just be doing one thing at a time, maintaining your singleness, and this is actively training your mind to have singleness of mind. And then you can use that quality of concentration in your daily life all throughout your life. All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So we've got this last chapter. I guess I'll go ahead and read this one. It's titled Mindfulness Directed to the Body, a Strong Post for the Mind. One dwells without having set up mindfulness of the body. So this first one, he's going to describe an analogy of someone who doesn't have mindfulness of the body and doesn't understand these bodily sensations. Suppose, monks, a monk would catch 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds, and tie them by a strong rope. He would catch a snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey, and tie each with a strong rope. Having done so, he would tie the ropes together with a knot in the middle and release them. Then, those 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds would each pull in the direction of its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull one way, thinking, let me enter an anthill. The crocodile would pull another way, thinking, let me enter the water. The bird would pull another way, thinking, let me fly up into the sky. The dog would pull another way, thinking, let me enter a village. The jackal would pull another way, thinking, let me enter a charnel ground. The monkey would pull another way, thinking, let me enter a forest. Now, when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would be dominated by the one among them that was strongest. They would submit to it and come under its control. So too, monks, when a monk has not developed and cultivated mindfulness directed to the body, the eye pulls in the direction of agreeable forms, and disagreeable forms are repulsive. The ear pulls in the direction of agreeable sounds, and disagreeable sounds are repulsive. The nose pulls in the direction of agreeable odors, and disagreeable odors are repulsive. The tongue pulls in the direction of agreeable flavors, and disagreeable flavors are repulsive. The body pulls in the direction of agreeable physical objects, and disagreeable physical objects are repulsive. The mind pulls in the direction of agreeable mental objects, and disagreeable mental objects are repulsive. It is in such a way that there is non-restraint. So let me teach you this one first before we go on to the next one. What he's describing here is 6 animals that tied together in a rope. There's a knot in the middle, and then there's the 6 animals, each on an individual rope, that they're going to pull in all these different directions. And eventually 5 of them are going to become fatigued, and whichever one is stronger, the 6th one, it's going to be pulled in that direction. And this is the analogy here is somebody who hasn't set up mindfulness of the body, that they're not aware of the 6 sense bases, and whichever sense base is the strongest, that has the strongest cravings, the mind is going to pull in that direction. So I'll give you an example that I gave at the temple. Somebody asked about an example here. Let's just say that you are walking down the street and you hear a engine of a car or a motorcycle, and you have a real interest in cars and motorcycles, and you hear this car rev up, and you hear this motorcycle rev up in your ear. Now, hearing that, the mind pulls and looks for the motorcycle or the car. But now you see this beautiful woman or this handsome man walk by, and now your eyes pull in that direction. That's what the Buddha is describing here, is the mind pulling in all these different directions. And you're basically subjected to whatever cravings that you have, and the mind is pulling through all these 6 sense bases. And now your mind is essentially undisciplined. It's unrestrained. It's just going to pull in whichever direction the mind has the strongest cravings, and you're just subjected to these cravings. But now he's going to describe to you somebody who has set up mindfulness of the bodily sensations and how this is different. So by you cultivating this awareness of the bodily sensations in meditation, here's an analogy of how you will experience difference. He titles this, "One resides having set up mindfulness of the body." Suppose, monks, a man would catch 6 animals with different domains and different feeding grounds and tie them with a strong rope. He would catch a snake, a crocodile, a bird, a dog, a jackal, and a monkey, and tie each by a strong rope. Having done so, he would bind them to a strong post or pillar. Then those 6 animals, with different domains and different feeding grounds, would each pull in the direction of its own feeding ground and domain. The snake would pull in one way, thinking, "Let me enter an anthill." The crocodile would pull in another way, thinking, "Let me enter the water." The bird would pull in another way, thinking, "Let me fly up into the sky." The dog would pull another way, thinking, "Let me enter a village." The jackal would pull in another way, thinking, "Let me enter a charnel ground." The monkey would pull in another way, thinking, "Let me enter the forest." Now, when these 6 animals become worn out and fatigued, they would stand close to that post or pillar. They would sit down there. They would lie down there. So too, monks, when a monk has developed and cultivated mindfulness directed to the body, the eye does not pull in the direction of agreeable forms, nor are disagreeable forms repulsive. The ear does not pull in the direction of agreeable sounds, nor are disagreeable sounds repulsive. The nose does not pull in the direction of agreeable odors, nor are disagreeable odors repulsive. The tongue does not pull in the direction of agreeable flavors, nor are disagreeable flavors repulsive. The body does not pull in the direction of agreeable physical objects, nor are disagreeable physical objects repulsive. The mind does not pull in the direction of agreeable mental objects, nor are disagreeable mental objects repulsive. In such a way, there is restraint. A strong post or pillar, this, monks, is a designation for mindfulness directed to the body. Therefore, monks, you should train yourselves thus. We will develop and cultivate mindfulness directed to the body. Make it our vehicle, make it our basis, stabilize it, exercise ourselves in it, and fully perfect it. Thus should you train yourselves. So here, this is a very different situation. This is the animals being tied to a post or a pillar. So now with this post and pillar, as the bird pulls, it gets yanked back. Or as the monkey pulls, it gets yanked back. As the jackal pulls, it gets yanked back. This is what it means to be able to have development of mindfulness of the bodily sensations. Because as you're aware of those bodily sensations, you can cut it off and yank it back. You're yanking the mind back. And then when you do this enough times, like the animals are going to get tired and they're just going to sit around the post and pillar, they're not going to long and yearn anymore. When they first get tied to this post and pillar, they're going to pull and pull and pull and try to get away. But eventually they're going to realize that they can't. And they're just going to sit there and be calm at that post and pillar. So your mind is the same way. In the unenlightened state, it's going to pull and pull and pull and pull. If your mind is unrestrained and you don't have mindfulness of the body, it's like that first analogy. All the animals are tied to each other, and whichever one is the strongest, they're going to win out and they're going to pull in that direction. But if you have this strong post or pillar, which is breathing mindfulness meditation and developing mindfulness of the bodily sensations, when you're aware that something is pulling, when the cravings are arising and you observe it pulling through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the bodily sensations of the mind, you can now restrain it and pull it back. And if you pull it back enough times, eventually the mind will become calm and concentrated and it will just sit there. So if you hear that sound of the car or the motorbike going by, you might look and be like, oh, interesting, nice car. That's a beautiful car. But it won't be, oh my goodness, that's such a nice car. I wish I had that. Oh my God, how did that man afford that? Or how did that woman afford that? Oh my goodness, right? Like that's what craving, desire, attachment is going to produce. The mind is going to be longing and yearning. It's going to become discontent. But if you have restraint and you've trained your mind, you might hear that same car and it's like, interesting, that's a beautiful car. They've got a really nice car. That's a really nice motorcycle. And same thing with the attractive individual. They walk past like, interesting, very beautiful woman, or very handsome man. But your mind will, oh my goodness, I gotta have that right now, right? That's the difference. When there's craving in the mind is longing and yearning. If you get what you want, you get pleasant feelings. If you don't get what you want, you're going to get painful feelings. So as long as you leave that craving, desire, attachment unrestrained, in some situations you're going to get pleasant feelings, but in other situations you're going to get painful feelings. But if your mind is restrained, it's not going to long and yearn and pull in that direction. You can just observe that that's a beautiful sounding car or a beautiful sounding motorbike, but your mind doesn't want it. It doesn't long for it. It doesn't yearn for it. And now you can reside peaceful and calm and steady and stable because there isn't craving, desire, attachment in the mind. If you guys have any questions on this one, you can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and then I'll be sure to answer your questions. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here. So what I'll do then is I'll just thank all of you guys for joining for today's class and invite you to attend our next class on Saturday, which is going to be the same book, Volume 3, but now we're going to move forward into the next 10 chapters, chapters 81 through 90. And you can read those before class because you've got the words of the Buddha and you've got the words that I'm sharing too to help you in that as well. And now you might come to class with certain questions that you have related to the particular chapter. And then in our group learning program, we're going to be studying tomorrow chapter 11 in volume 1. Chapter 11 is meditation, developing your practice. This is where I'm going to go through all the ins and outs of meditation, which really connects nicely to what we've been studying today in today's class. So if you either need a refresher on that or you've never learned that with me, I'm going to go through all 4 types of meditation that one might need in order to get to enlightenment. There's 2 primary forms, and then there's 2 optional meditations that some people may use and some people may not. They're kind of specialized meditations. But the 2 primary meditations, everybody would need those. So you would like to be sure that your meditation practice is really well developed. So you can learn what I'm teaching, and then you can ask any and all questions that you like. And then this Wednesday, we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation together, a time to encourage, support, and motivate each other in our meditation practice. So you're welcome to join for that as well. So we'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Thank you all for reading. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your dedication and diligence to learning and practicing these teachings. We'll see you guys in a future class. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.